This review was made possible by the Yojo Outlet Center, specializing in vintage G.I. Joe toys and parts.
Hello everyone, I'm Kevin, otherwise known as Forum BX257, here to bring you another 1980s G.I. Joe toy review. And today I'll be taking a look at the Cobra small missile launching vehicle, the 1988 Adder. Like a lot of 1987 and 1988 characters and vehicles, the Adder makes no cartoon appearances. Unfortunately, it makes no comic book appearances either. And I say unfortunate because during the time of the release, the Marvel comic was going through the Cobra Civil War story arc, which was issues 73 through 77. So a lot of 1987 and 1988 Cobra vehicles were being introduced in the pages, and the Adder just wasn't one of them. Really rather unfortunate because, well, quite frankly, with its stylized but still sort of utilitarian and dark blue color scheme, this looks more like a Cobra vehicle than a lot of what came before and even after it.
Considering the Adder was sold in the same assortment as the small vehicles, it really does seem like you're getting a larger vehicle for your price. At least, it's very long. However, you turn it this way and you can see just how narrow this thing is. That's a seat for a single action figure, so this thing just really isn't very wide at all. So that's where you're losing your plastic quantity. The Adder is just a very simple vehicle. It has a seat for one figure. It has rolling wheels, 6 of them. It has 2 very large missiles. They're very well detailed as well. And of course, the feature of the Adder is the fact that it can raise these missiles and lower them. Taking a closer look, if you raise the missile base, you can see that this piston goes along with it, holding it up. As a matter of fact, the piston is actually in a track, and there is actually a little dip at the end of the track, so if you push it all the way in, the piston actually locks into that hole at the end of the track. And now it's actually quite sturdy in this position. It's firing almost straight up, but it's not going to slam down unless you actually pull on the piston again. Just a quick look at the surface detail. It is, of course, hollow in the middle there, but that's okay. That doesn't necessarily have to be a filled-in portion. And I especially love the tactical display here, even though it's just a sticker. The box art shows the 1988 Road Pig manning this thing, and, well, I don't think a Dreadnought should be really manning anything other than a Dreadnought vehicle. But I can understand that, as it was a 1988 figure and this is a 1988 vehicle. They need an example for that, and there actually weren't very many 1988 Cobras, other than the Toxo Viper and the Hydro Viper. And, well, I don't think either of them really fit in there. So what I do is I display them actually with my Big Boa figure. And I think the Big Boa figure actually looks rather nice because in the red seat, his red spike straps actually wind up looking like seat belts. It's almost hard to believe that the Adder was made in 1988 when a lot of other G.I. Joe and Cobra vehicles were getting kind of funny looking. The Adder actually is kind of utilitarian, but it has that wonderful Cobra blue, which goes so well with some of the earlier, more classic designs. I mean, just look at it beside the Cobra Hiss and the 1984 Asp. It just blends right in. One thing I've always been a bit curious about is the design of the front end, specifically this hole right in the front. It almost looks like it's big enough for a parts tab, as if you're supposed to put a windshield or something right here. The entire front sculpt is a little bit dipped down just to add to that, but nothing goes there. I kind of wonder whether this was originally designed to accept a windshield, and it was just sort of taken out because it just cost too much for the budget of the toy. The missiles for the Adder are very large. As a matter of fact, you can compare them to the 1985 air defense missiles, which were the largest missiles for their time. Yeah, they're just a smidgen smaller than the air defense missiles. But still, they're rather large and very aggressive, and they look like they're long-range missiles as well. Which brings me to my next point. What is the opposite number on the G.I. Joe side? And quite frankly, I actually can't think of one. As a mobile, manned unit with long-range missiles, there just really isn't any other vehicle that's really dedicated to that purpose. There are of course, other missile vehicles like the 1983 Wolverine, but it had rather small missiles. You can also point to the 1984 Vamp Mark II, or even the 1985 Snowcat, which only had missiles and torpedoes as its armament, but again, those are rather small, I would almost say short-range or medium-range missiles, rather than these giant things which dwarf even the action figures. I know a lot of people actually will point out to another vehicle made in the same year, the 1988 RPV, Remote Piloted Vehicle. Unfortunately, I don't think that this actually counts because while this thing looks like a missile, it actually isn't. If you're looking for a Cobra adder on the aftermarket, there's really only two things you need to look out for. One of them is whether or not the vehicle still has its two control sticks. Now, a lot of G.I. Joe joysticks often crack off, and these are no exception, but I think these are actually rather sturdy. However, it's the rocket you really need to look out for. It has 8 of these fins per rocket, and those are most often cracked off. This thing came in 4 pieces, which you had to construct together yourself. Unfortunately, there's a seam line all the way down the rocket, which bisects underneath one of these fins, meaning that even though the fin is rather thick, it's actually not held on like halfway through. So this fin, this fin, this fin, and this fin are basically just kind of hanging on there with half the plastic that the other 4 fins are held on by. So a little bit of pressure, you drop this thing on the floor, and whoops, there it goes. And as a result of that design flaw, it's really hard to find an adder with both rockets with all of its fins. As a matter of fact, I'm pretty sure, as this thing was given to me by Chris Cooper of the Yojo Outlet Center, it only had 1 missile, and I'm pretty sure that 1 missile was probably either removed to add to another vehicle which didn't have a proper unbroken missile, or didn't have a missile at all, or that missile was broken beyond the fact of, keeping on with the adder. So when he gave it to me, I knew that I had to get another rocket. Fortunately, the adder is plentiful, so you can just sort of find parts for this fairly easily. Starting in 1992, Hasbro also made the adder available for mail order, which probably also accounts for the larger number of loose items you can find on the aftermarket today. As a matter of fact, I originally had this toy before giving it away because when I bought it, mine was cracked back here. Now this is actually a fairly sturdy piece, so I'm pretty sure mine was abused or something like that. I gave it away to a customizer, and that's another thing about the adder which is fairly interesting, is it's actually a darling of customizers, as the body was actually 2 pieces which you can sort of take apart. So if you just wanted a nice little rocket launching trailer, you can have that, and if you just needed a tiny little cockpit, you can have that as well. Just a quick look at the the first being whether the control... Well, that's all the time I have right now. Please check out my Facebook page for more information and behind-the-scenes photos for these reviews. Thank you for watching this video, and stay tuned for next time to see another 1980s G.I. Joe toy review. See you then.